Start time's going to be 10 after 7, just so we're clear.
Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
The World According to Elmer is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing top 40 hits from the 60s through the 80s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River. Welcome aboard. We're headed for the World According to Elmer, with hosts Jerry Sorensen and Pat Morrow. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it there. Better buckle in and enjoy the ride. Here come our hosts now.
Well, good evening, everyone, and we're glad to be with you again this week. My name is Jerry Sorensen, and my call sign is KG8RRY. Our Elmer is with us this evening, Mr. Pat Morrow, and he is N80QP. Mr. Pat, how's your week been?
Oh, I got a serious head cold.
A serious head cold? How did you get that?
I think a couple of people over the last couple of days have come over to the house and they were snotting around and all that, and I think I've picked it up from there.
I can hear it now that you're talking. I did not notice that pre-show, but it's coming through now. So
I've been
that
on
nasal thing going on.
I took some Mucinex and all that. We'll be all right. It's one of them things. I just feel kind of run
Well,
down.
you are a trooper.
Darn right. Nothing but the best for you, Jer.
I know it. It's all good. Hey, I got something this week I want to show you.
No, you didn't. No. Oh, that's cool.
You see what that is?
What is that?
This is a dongle.
Oh, cool.
You ever heard of a dongle?
Yeah.
Okay, well this one
is
one is an RTL SDR. This is a software defined radio right here.
Oh, sweet. I got one of them.
Do you have a dongle?
Yeah, I got one. I got it on one of my weaker moments.
I think this is one of my big Amazon purchases, but at any rate, I was reading an article this week that may interest you. This one gentleman, ham radio operator, just like us, decided that there had to be a better way than enduring the noisy conditions on some of the bands. And so what he did is he went around his entire property. He has a pretty good sized house out in California, and he went around the entire property and he put an antenna. He put a piece of wire about 12 inches off of the ground. And what he did, he has a fence. His entire yard is fenced in, and he went around that fence, and he had these little insulators that he bought at the like the Tractor Supply Company, and he, like you were going to put an electric fence up or whatnot, and he tacked those insulators onto his fence. So what he did is he then ran this wire around his entire property, and he calls it a ground loop. And he runs that wire to a software-defined radio. And he finds that with that wire, down next to the ground, about 12 inches off the ground, that he gets basically no static and that his reception is fantastic. Have you ever heard of that type
Yes,
of a setup?
I have. Remember when we were talking about that beverage antenna? And
Yes.
we found the stuff that was similar to what you're talking about there. If you remember, they put it on that fence that was about a foot or two off the ground.
Yes.
Remember what I'm talking about? What? Remember what?
I do. Now, I have never actually seen a beverage antenna, but you described it in great detail, and it sounds like about the same thing.
Yeah, that's probably basically what that's for, and it's going to be receive only. So yeah, you
Well,
don't
there was
really.
a whole bunch of antennas made back in the 1930s and the 1940s, and a lot of experimentation was done. And it even made it into the ham magazines, especially the ARRL's magazine, QST. But these were antennas, receiving antennas that were put down in the ground. And there were hams that would actually go out to the backyard and they would dig a hole and they would place their antennas um, down in these holes in the backyard. And they said that the reception was fantastic. And on top of that, they had very little noise. And I don't know whether any amateurs have continued with those types of projects as we have moved on, but I can tell you who did continue with that technology, and that is the United States government. They made a number of antennas that are located down inside the ground, where they would actually dig places out in the ground and place these antennas
You wouldn't think it'd
down in the
transmit
ground.
that well.
What's that?
You wouldn't think that would transmit that well, but I guess it does.
I wouldn't think it would, but I'm told that it's amazing, especially for receiving. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a ground loop up around the property here. Again, it's receive only, it's not transmit. Now I'll use I'm going to experiment. MFJ makes a product, and you can see it in the back of the Ham Radio magazine. Speaking of QST, it's always there about the back page, but they make a device where you can use a software defined radio along with your regular radio. And the dealio is this: when you touch the push to transmit switch, of course you tap into that relay, and what happens is this device that MFJ makes is it allows the transmitter that you're using to transmit through the antenna, but then when you release the push to talk button, at that point it disconnects the transmitter from the antenna and it switches it over to the SDR.
You know,
And so,
there is an interesting thing there that I discovered here about 2 or 3 months ago. I was going to bring this up one of these days anyway. There's a place on the internet. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's SDR Listen.
okay,
That actually has a bunch of SDR radios online in different places. And what hams are doing, it's all real time. So what hams are doing is if you've got a lot of static in an area and you can't
yes,
hear, they're going to these SDR listen places. I know there's one over here in Stowe that we've actually been on before. What they're doing is you can listen on your computer, and it's going to show you what's coming in on their antenna away from your static, and then you just key up and talk.
see,
And
that's the same theory as this.
these people are making wonderful contacts from that, and they're able to hear stuff that you wouldn't believe they'd be able to hear. But,
Well, the thing is this: if you've got a good setup, you can transmit farther than you can receive. It's one of those S7, S8, S9, 80-meter nights. The people are out there, but we've talked about this on the show ad nauseum. That doesn't mean you can hear them just because you're out there. If the neighbor next door is running his toaster and the one over on the other side just put in the Christmas tree and the Christmas tree has a bunch of LED lights on it, you may not be hearing everything that's out there on the bands. And so you're smart to do the type of thing that you're talking about, Pat.
it always kind of fascinated me that you could actually incorporate the two like that. You can actually talk on a radio and not use turn the receive of the radio down and just
Yeah,
use
well,
it off
and
the computer.
think about it. My radios, I just looked up at them while we were talking. My radios are all from the 1960s and the 1970s. You can imagine that the SDR radios today have a better receive than the radio technology that was put into my Swan radios. Now, that doesn't mean that they can out transmit the Swan. The Swan can transmit just about anywhere in the world. I have been all over the world on these radios. But the ability to hear is vital because it doesn't matter. You can transmit to the moon, but if you can't hear anything, what difference does it make?
That's exactly right.
So, these people, they want all these watts as far as transmitting. And, I'm guilty as charged. But still, if you can't hear, it doesn't do any good that you can reach somebody. So it is what it is. However, proving that we can reach people that are not in our
Oh, here we
geographical
go.
area.
Oh,
Guess
here
what
we
I
go.
got this week, Pat?
I just don't know. What did you get this week, Jer?
Got some QSL cards here, buddy. Got some QSL cards. This is KU4E. Appreciate this nice card. Get it where there's not a glare on it there. KU4E. And this gentleman here, this was a CW call, and he is a fellow SKCC member. Straight Key Century Club, by the way, is what SKCC means. Last week on the program, I had one of those senior moments, and I'm like, SKCC, I know what that is. What is that? That's the Straight Key Century Club. A little bit antagonistic towards bugs and not bugs, but paddles and whatnot. These people like the good old fashioned straight key. But at any rate, thank you for the nice card. I appreciate that very much. Had a nice conversation. He is down in North Carolina, and North Carolina is a good reach for my station here. Here is KC1MD, and KC1MD is over in the great state of Maine. And if you can see it, Maine has a point, and all the way down here at the very, very bottom is Kittery Point. And that's where this gentleman is located, and we had a nice conversation this past week. This one here, I don't know what to do with this card. I can tell you that it is KB6NU, but I can't read much more than just the fact that it's KB6NU. Can you read any of that? I can't read it.
No,
It's like the red obliterates everything that is on the card. So I'm not sure who that was, but it was someplace in Michigan, so it wasn't a real far contact anyway. Here's a guy in Georgia. This is a beautiful card, and he obviously likes his space stuff. This is N4RXV, and he is located down in Crawford County, Georgia, in Byron, Georgia, and he's a space guy. And he has a beautiful QSL card. What was really funny is you can see on the back of the card how the Postal Service puts on your cards, they put like a piece of paper that sticks to the bottom of the card that's got a barcode on it. And I'm sure that's for their automated machinery. But they put one on the other side of the card too, which I had to carefully take off because down at the bottom of the card, if you can see it here, that's where all the particulars of the QSO were. And so when they put that barcode along the bottom of the card, they obliterated the details of the contact. And so fortunately, I was able to rescue that this week. And with that, I will discontinue boring you with the cards. That's the latest and the greatest on the cards. We are talking about a couple of interesting topics this week. And which video did you pull up first there, boss?
Either one.
Either one?
We're good to go. It's either the code or the nets.
Okay, well, let's do this then. Let's go ahead and start with the code. The premise of this video is, and it's true, ham radio operators use a lot of slang and a lot of lingo and a lot of codes. Now, this is a nice card that I had gotten some time back. In fact, this came in with a QSL card. A guy put his QSL card in an envelope, and he sent this along, and this is a list of all the Q codes. And boy, are there a bunch of Q codes. There's a whole side of codes on that side. This entire back side is all different Q codes, like QRN is an example. QRN is nature made noise, which we were just talking about a second ago. So if you say to somebody QRN, you're saying, am I staticky or am I noisy? Are you able to hear me clearly? It's a way of shortening up what it is you're trying to say. But the premise of the video is simple. All of this can be very confusing to the brand new ham operator. So what to do about all the slang and all the code and all the Q codes and all of this, how do you make your way around? So let's go ahead, Chief, and roll the video, and we'll come back and talk about codes on the other side.
You're listening to the Crooked River Radio Network and The World According to Elmer.
Amateur radio operators sure do love using codes and jargon. Am I right? Yeah, I'm right. And for a lot of people, that can be intimidating. It can keep them off the air. I mean, for some people who are a little mic shy, the idea of using a handheld radio like this to make contact with random people and make conversation with them, that can be tough enough to overcome. But then throw on having to know codes and jargon on top of it, it can be really difficult for some people. And it makes sense why so many technician class license holders never make a single QSO. I think that's sad. Well, I'm here to tell you that honestly, if you have a radio, you have your technician class license, you don't need to know any codes or any jargon to get on the air and have a conversation. You just don't. I'm going to repeat that. You don't need to know any codes or any jargon. If you're on the air and someone throws a code or jargon at you that you don't understand, just say, hey, I'm a new ham. What does that mean? And hams are friendly people. They'd be happy to tell you what that means and probably offer more help and assistance in the future. Today, I'm going to go over some of the codes and jargon, define it for you in case you want to know it before you do get on the air, and then I'll talk about the different modes of operation and how they use codes and jargon a little differently, and different codes, different jargon. Should be interesting. Let's get going. Oh yeah, and if you're an experienced ham, stick around. See what I have to say, see if I missed any codes or jargon, go ahead and put it in the comments section. Thanks. Today I'm at Cogburn Road Park in Alpharetta, Georgia. This is a small park. It's my first time here, but it's very nice and it's such a great day out. I just had to get outside. One of the things you might want to learn before you get on the air is how to say your call sign phonetically. Hams use the NATO phonetic alphabet, but if you're using it for your call sign, you can get creative. You can use pretty much any word that you want for your call sign. And I know a lot of hams that do this. They come up with a creative little saying for the last 3 letters of their call sign or even the first few. They use creative words. It helps people remember your call sign, helps people remember you. So you can get creative with it or just learn it in NATO. As you go along, if you do just learn your call sign, as you go along, you'll learn the rest of the alphabet. It's not that hard. And yeah, you don't have to memorize the whole thing up front. A lot of the codes that amateur radio operators use are Q codes. They're 3-letter codes starting with the letter Q, and they were first used by telegraph operators, yeah, back in the 1800s. Telegraph operators had to pound out every letter of every word in Morse code, so a lot of the common phrases and questions and exchanges that they would have, they just shortened to 3-letter codes. Makes sense. Today, it's still used, and you'll see a lot of Q codes all over ham radio and all different types of operation, from Morse code still being used in ham radio to even on the air on local repeaters, you will hear some Q codes. So let's talk about those. First is QSO. And QSO is just a 2-way communication. So when someone thanks you for a great QSO, they're just saying, hey, that was a nice conversation, a good contact. They might also use it to say, oh, I had 5 QSOs today. That just means they talked to 5 different people. Real easy. The next one is QTH. Now, if you look this up on the internet, the original telegraph meaning is where are you operating from? Well, hams use it as home. It's just another word for home. So they'll say, I'm at my QTH, or I'm arriving at my QTH. It just means they're home. Another one you'll hear very often is 7-3. That's actually a code for best regards. Hams usually end their conversations on all different types of communications Even when they're on the internet posting messages to each other, they'll sign off with 73. Some people say 73s or 73, but the most common usage is just 73, and that's how hams end an on-air conversation. Next, you may hear on a repeater, you may not. I don't think you really need to know this one, but QSL. QSL can be used as a question, like, did you copy my transmission? Or it can be used as a statement, QSL, meaning I did receive your transmission. It's a pretty easy one. You more often hear this one on the HF bands. There's a couple regarding signal strength or signal quality that you might want to know. First is QRM. QRM, and that just means static or interference. If someone says, hey, can you repeat your transmission? There was some QRM. That just means something interfered with your transmission and you need to repeat it. And somebody might say, there's no QRM, or, you know, the QRM in your transmission is gone. It just means static or interference of some type. The next is full quieting. You'd actually hear this quite a bit on repeaters. Somebody will say, if you ask how your signal strength is, like how do I sound, somebody might come back and say full quieting. Basically what that means is your transmission has enough power to fully quiet the repeater so there's no background static noise or QRM, and that's a good thing. So to have full quieting, that means your signal is very strong and good into the repeater. There's a couple pieces of jargon centered around how you're operating. The first would be mobile. Mobile is when you're in a vehicle and you can transmit while moving. So I've heard different things. If somebody just says they're mobile, more than likely they're in their car or truck. I have heard other types of mobile, bicycle mobile, motorcycle mobile. I even had a contact with somebody who was balloon mobile. Yep, they were up in a hot air balloon. So you can put some qualifiers on it, and typically if I'm out for a walk in a park like this and I'm having a contact or want to talk to somebody, I'll say I'm pedestrian mobile. Now mobile is different from portable. Portable means that you're using a station away from your QTH or your normal base, somewhere out remote, but you're not really moving. So you're essentially setting up a station somewhere other than your QTH. Another one you'll hear often on repeaters is clear, I'm clear, or clear on your final. It just means you're leaving the frequency or turning off your radio. You're going to stop transmitting. When somebody says I'm clear, that means they're gone. Don't bother communicating with them anymore. If someone says clear on your final, that just means they'll leave after listening to your last transmission. So go ahead and say goodbye, say 7-3, thank them, whatever, and then after that transmission, you won't hear from them again because they're clear on your final. A couple other interesting codes that you'll hear on repeaters quite a bit is YL, which stands for young lady. So if you're one of the 2% of viewers on my channel that is a female and you're operating on ham radio, you'd very likely be referred to as a YL. In fact, my club has a YL net every Thursday night, where ladies participating in ham radio get together on a repeater on Thursday nights, and they have a net and talk about various topics. If you're a YL and would like to join that, the repeater's actually Echolink connected. You can join in from wherever in the world, from your PC or phone, and join that YL net. For information, go to nfarl.org, North Fulton Amateur Radio League.org, NFARL. I'll put a link in the description.
So I'll jump in here real quick, and I guess some good jargon. By the way, name's Alex. Alpha Lima Echo X-Ray over in Buford, and some good ham jargon I think I didn't get initially starting off was XYL, the XYL, the ex-young lady, the wife. I didn't grab that one initially. I was like, what does XYL mean? What is the ex-young lady? Okay, that makes sense now that you married her. That's a good one. Reading the mail, as a lot of people do. They just listen, they don't talk, they just read the mail as they listen to the machine. That's a good one. I was just reading the mail, and had to jump in here, case in point myself. So there you go. Probably in the range of like taking a station break instead of saying using the restroom, take a station break. Those are my three.
Thanks, Alex. You actually threw in a fourth one too with machine, and that's one I didn't. I know what it is. Obviously, it's a repeater. People refer to the repeaters as machines, but that's a good one. Last piece of jargon that's used quite a bit on repeaters is rig. A rig is basically your radio. So if someone asks what kind of rig are you running, or what kind of rig do you have, or do you have an HF rig, they're just asking about a radio. You can use radio and rig interchangeably. Because the communication using repeaters is usually really clear and doesn't have a lot of static in the background, or communication on repeaters is pretty easy. They don't use a ton of codes and jargon. A lot of it just carries over from single sideband voice communications. Now when you get into the HF, or you're even doing long range 2 meter or 70 centimeter work on single sideband, because there is static, because you're dealing with the noise and trying to maybe decipher weaker signals, more jargon and especially codes are used. So let's talk about those. First, there's a couple codes and even a piece of jargon related to power. You're going to hear QRP, and if you've watched some of my QRP videos, that just means low power. Now, definitions of what low power is change a little bit depending on the contest or who you're talking to, but typically I think most hams would agree that QRP is 10 watts or less. Next is QRO, and QRO means high power. Now it depends on who you talk to or what contest is defining what QRO power means, but I think generally speaking we can agree that it's 100 watts or more. Sometimes they define it as 200 watts or more, because a lot of the ham radio HF base station radios put out without amplification 100 watts. Which leads me to the next one, which is barefoot. You'll hear people say I'm running barefoot power. And what that means is there's no linear amplifier. So I might say on an HF band, I'm running my ICOM IC7300 barefoot, and anyone who knows the IC7300 knows that I'm running a maximum of 100 watts. So the big one to know for single sideband is CQ. CQ, CQ, CQ. People call it out all the time, CQ. And what that means is it's an invitation to have a QSO or two-way communication. So whoever's saying CQ is basically saying anyone who receives this transmission can come back to me. I'd like to make a contact with you. And it's used on both the HF bands as well as some digital modes. I mean, all over. Don't use it on a repeater though. That's a sure way to broadcast that you're brand new to the hobby. Don't use CQ on a repeater. You might actually catch some flack if you do that. Another very common Q code you hear on single sideband is QRZ or QRZ. Now QRZ is a common website. Obviously QRZ.com is a common website for hams to use, but it's also a way of telling people that you're available for communication. And it's most often used for a contesting station or a DX station that has a lot of people trying to contact them. What they'll do is they'll work one station, and when they're done with that exchange of information, the operator will say QRZ, and that will mean everyone can try to give their call sign again and try to make a contact with that lucky operator who's experiencing a pileup. A pileup is basically just a bunch of people trying to contact one operator. So you'll hear it quite frequently if there's a strong signal and he's calling CQ or QRZ. You'll hear in the background a bunch of call signs, and that operator has to pick one call sign out of the bunch to exchange information with and make that contact. Another one that's used all the time is DX. DX just stands for long distance contact. Now, maybe you can help me out in the comments section, because I don't know how far a contact has to be in order to qualify as a DX. Now, I do know that in the United States and even Canada, that people don't really consider, even if you're going coast to coast, they don't consider that to be DX. You pretty much have to go to another continent, Europe, South America, Asia, for you to be able to call that a DX contact. But maybe you can correct me in the comment section. All right, just a couple more. This one actually comes from Morse code, or CW as we call it in the hobby. CW stands for continuous wave, but it's hi-hi, H-I-H-I, and apparently when you hear it in Morse code, it sounds like laughter. Here, take a listen. Now, I don't know Morse code, but essentially hi-hi is laugh out loud. It's the original laugh out loud. They use it either to signify that they're laughing at what somebody said, or that what they're saying is intended to be funny. So hi, that's an odd one. Now we come to rag chew. Rag chew is a great piece of ham jargon, and rag chew just means a long conversation, or an informal conversation amongst hams. If you want to get on the air and have a conversation with somebody, you just say, hey, is anyone up for a rag chew? And that just means that you want to do more than exchange your location, signal strength, and call sign. You want to actually converse. Last but not least is lid. Lid is a bad operator, somebody who's making mistakes, or that is considered doing things that go against what amateur radio operators should do. They get called a lid. So don't be a lid. Well, that's it for codes and jargon. I hope you learned something. And if you're new to the hobby or thinking about getting in the hobby, what I hope you learned was that you don't have to know any codes or jargon in order to get on the air. You can simply ask what it means, and hams are friendly folks. They'll help you out, especially if you say you're new. I thought it was fun when I hopped on my local repeater and asked for some input. Got to talk to a bunch of different people and get their inputs. That was fun. So a great day out here in the park. Got to talk to some folks and hopefully help you learn something. If I missed any codes or jargon that you think people should know, please go ahead and leave a comment and put it in the comment section. All right, this is K4BBL. I'm clear, 7-3.
Well, there you go. That's everything you wanted to know about codes and jargon. And he had some code and jargon. I think as I was listening to him talk, the thing that struck me, Pat, is when a brand new person comes into this hobby, there is a lot of unfamiliar language.
Exactly. They want a couple of things. Let me tell you a couple of things that caught my ear there.
Please do.
He was talking about the different places you can talk and different jargon that they use. A lot of times you'll hear maritime mobile, which means that it's somebody that's out on a boat. If you're maritime mobile, you're probably out on a boat. The other thing was that barefoot thing. That piece of jargon always gets me. So what he was telling,
I consider that to be a CB radio piece of jargon. What about you?
What he was actually sitting there telling us that if he wasn't running any power for where he was, would he be barefoot in the park?
That's pretty funny.
There's a lot of terms that you pick it up as you go along. Nobody's going to know all of it.
There's going to be people disagree with some of those terms also. He said that with regard to QRP, he considered that to be anyone that was transmitting with 10 watts or less. I think that he would find out in this area, most of the ham radio operators that run QRP consider QRP to be 5 watts or less. 10 watts is not considered QRP around here.
Well, yes and no. I don't know about around my understanding of QRP. It's always under 10 watts.
Yeah.
And
okay.
you
So
have some of those. You have some of those radios like that weird named one that they came out with. It's a $600 10-watt radio. It's a QRP.
Oh
radio.
yeah, the Zygu.
The Zygu, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a 20-watt radio. That's definitely that's QRO right there. And speaking of QRO, what does QRO mean? Well, Jerry knows what QRO means because Jerry's a QRO guy. That means more power.
That's right. Just like Tim Taylor.
QRO, Scotty. QRO, Scotty.
More power.
We're back at Star Trek here. I had a guy tell me the other night at the end of our CW conversation, at the end of our continuous wave conversation, our Morse code conversation, he said QRT, and he wrapped it up. And I actually had to go look up what QRT was. I didn't say anything.
Pretty much clear.
Sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you don't say.
It means
but he was
leaving
telling
the radio.
me that he was going to go shut his radio off.
Yep. Yeah. I'm leaving the radio.
So when you think you've got them all figured out, you don't really have them all figured out, trust me, because there's plenty more, as you saw on this card. I mean, we could just go down through all these different Q codes, and it's amazing how many of them there are. The other thing that he mentioned that I had a good laugh here on this end is he brought up the NATO phonetic code, the alphabet. And this is something that we use a lot. I use it every night because when I go out on the bands on 80 meters or 40 meters or 20 meters during the day, there is static. Sometimes the other person is a little bit hard to understand. You're doing yourself a favor and you're doing the other party a favor if you use phonetic letters of the alphabet. In other words, I say, this is Kilo Golf 8, Radio Yankee. Well, radio isn't actually the phonetic, the NATO phonetic code for R. That is Romeo. But since I don't like the word Romeo, and it's hard to say in a pileup, I just go with radio because it's fast and sweet. But you should stick as close as you can to the NATO code. And if you really want to hear a butchering of the NATO code, go on the air on field day. You will have a blast. Last year's field day, Pat, as God is my judge, I heard an XYL, no doubt, on the air. And for D, she used the word Dorito.
Well, how about WAVPV, very pretty virgin? I've used that before for the.
Have you?
Yep.
N8OQP, N8O, quiet, please.
Old quiet Patrick. Nobody ate
quiet Patrick.
Nobody ate old quiet Patrick.
Well, the idea there is if you're listening to somebody who's a long ways away, and they're kind of soft anyway, and you're dealing with a high QRN. That's the other thing. He brought up QRM, but he didn't bring up QRN. The difference between those two codes, QRM is man-made noise. QRN is the noise that nature makes.
Yep.
Well, what if you don't know the difference between the two? I guess you make something up as you go. QRM would be the static as an example from the motor of a car. That's something that's man-made. QRN would be a thunderstorm in the background.
Exactly.
And so all these different codes, and of course the native, the NATO code thing, a lot to learn. And
as
just
far
the
as
basic stuff that he was talking about.
To explain a little bit further, as far as the NATO codes and that go, they pick words that don't sound like any other words, and can be very distinguishable under a lot of high pressure static or whatever.
Yes.
There are variations to them, and even I use a lot of times if I can't get through with Oscar Quebec Papa. I'm November 8 Oscar Quebec Papa, but on the other side of that, if I can't get through to them with that, or they don't hear it, I'll use Ocean Queen Papa.
Mm-hmm.
November 8 Ocean Queen Papa, and I've gotten into the habit of using that one more than I do the actual international phonetic. But you can use,
as long as what you're using gets the point across, then you're fine.
And
that's the whole idea behind it.
It's like the old oxymoron that they use in the testing. You know, whatever. You know, you're allowed to use 1,500 watts, but you're only allowed to use the most amount of wattage you're allowed to use is to be able to make the contact. And it's kind of a similar idea here. You can use anything as long as it's not a cuss word or anything like that, and it's just to make that contact.
That is a whole different kind of code there. And I have heard a few lids use that other code.
And now it gives a whole new meaning to the word. To the word. Excuse me. Put a lid on it.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to be called a lid, folks. It's not a good thing to be called a lid. You're not you're not doing anybody any favors. Or as we learned last week, don't be called a lid and don't be called a sad ham.
I'm still trying to get over that one.
Yeah, the lid that did that video that we played last week about sad hams, you know, that guy. Anyway, all of this aside, so what about these nets? We talk about nets all the time, getting on the net. Uh,
I ran
Maybe a
2
net
of them
is
last
something
night.
that, what's that?
I ran 2 of them last night. I ran an HF net
See, you're the man.
and I ran a 2-meter net. My usually when the way I have it set up, there's 5 of us I think that run the 2.7 machine, the nets on there every Monday night, and there's 4 of us, one every Monday night, so you get a different voice every week. And the way that it turned out last night, I usually split my nights up. I'll do the 10-meter net on Monday one week, and then the 2-meter net the week before,
Okay.
so that I don't have to sit in this chair for 3 or 4 hours getting bored, and my butt getting sore and everything like that. I sit in this chair enough
Going to
as it is.
sleep.
But the way it works out is I usually do I'll do the Monday night on the first week of the month, and the Monday night on the second week I'll do the HF net. Well, last night I did my 2-meter net, and the guy that does the HF net, which was on 6 meters last night, gets on there and he has an equipment failure. So he pops back on 2 meters, and I'm just sitting out. I had just got up and walked over to the couch, and I hear, "I'm having equipment problems. Anybody out here?" I walked, and another friend of mine was in there, and he said, "Anything I can help with?" And he says, "I key the radio up," and he says it keys up for a second, and then it shuts off. And he says, he says, "It's going to be a little bit before I can get it started." I said, "Oh, all right." I keyed up. I said, "All right, I'll just take it for tonight, and you can have mine next week." And we agreed on that. So I did 2 nets last night.
So you were a net guy. You were a net dude.
Yeah, we don't get a whole ton of check-ins or anything like that anymore. We used to hit around 30. Here lately, it's been 15 or 20. It's pandemic and everything else is affecting it. But
Well, and that's a big deal. And that has happened in a lot of different areas right now. So we're going to talk about nets for just a few minutes. He brought it up on the other video, so we'll continue on with nets. What is it like to do a net? If you've never been on a net, perhaps you're brand new to the hobby, then this will be an interesting video for you also.
okay.
So
On the other side of this, we'll come back and I'll give you a real insight on what it's like to sit there.
you do that. We'll look forward to that.
Now,
Right on the other side of this video, you're listening to The World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio. That's Pat. I'm Jerry, and we'll be back.
Hi, it's Tim, Golf 5 Tango Mike. Today we're going to have a little chat about nets. Welcome to the channel. If you're a new person or if you haven't subscribed yet, then think about pressing that button and giving a thumbs up as well. That'd be great. And if you're a returnee and a long-time subscriber or a recent one, then welcome back anyway. Good to see you. And I hope you're all keeping well too, by the way. It's been quite a trying time for all of us, and I think we're just in the middle of it, really. The end is nowhere near in sight yet. Anyway, enough of that. Nets. What are they, and why are they becoming more important? Well, during the lockdown period, of course, wherever you are, whether you're in Britain, America, whatever country you're in, amateur radio has become a lot more popular. A lot more people are coming back to it, and a lot more people are wanting to take it up for the first time. Now, what this increase in activity has brought on, and certainly during the daytime, has become, people are becoming more regularly involved on the air during the day. And what this means is they're more likely to meet up, maybe at a certain frequency at a certain time, to chat to their friends. Now, this isn't a net as such, but it's a regular sort of meeting place for hams to come together and to have a chat. Net is similar but different. Similar in a way that because you tend to have a core of people on frequency who sort of chat to each other, and you have other people joining in from time to time. And then you have, really with a net, a bit more of a formalised sort of structure. Now what I want to do is run through what I think are the ingredients of a good net. I come from this from the experience of having to help run a net a little bit, actually on 11 metres to be honest. I've also dabbled at running a net once or twice on 80 metres last year as well, with varying degrees of success. And from my experiences, what I'd like to do is to run through with you what I think are the ingredients of a good net. So you've got two main types of net. You've got the first type of net where basically you have loads of check-ins, say, I don't know, 8, 10, 12, 15 check-ins, no more than that. And then the chair will ask each person just to basically give a 1 or 2 minute over on what they're doing, signal reports on others, and it goes back to the chair, and then the chair invites the next person, goes back to the chair, and invites the next person. So effectively each person just gives their over, stops, gives it back to the chair, and the chair moves on to the next person. That's a more traditional way of doing a net. The way I like to do it is slightly different, and there are loads of ways to do nets by the way, but these are the two ways that I've come across. The way I would prefer to do it is that you still have a chair, and then you'd have people call in. Now the chair would probably would ask for people to check into the net. It might bring in 5 or 6 people. And then what he would then, or he or she would then do, is try and get people to work each other. So you start off with the first person who called in, and then you'd work person number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you go back to person 2, who would then wouldn't work number 1 because it worked 1, but it worked 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So effectively what you're doing is making sure everybody has a chance to work everybody else. Once you've gone through the list, you then do another call for check-ins, get another maybe 5 or 6 in, and then they start again back to the top. So they go back to person 2, and so on. I find that works really well, but there are certain things you have to do as a net controller to make sure that any net, in fact, really works smoothly. Before we look at any sort of specific things, the one thing you have to have as a net controller, or chair, whatever you want to call it, is a thick skin. Quite often you get people, maybe not doing the net, but following the net, have a little moan about the fact they couldn't be heard, or about the fact they had to wait a long time. And it's good feedback, but you need to be able to take that on board, maybe work on your technique a little bit, or sometimes just say, what could I do? But don't get discouraged. Social media is a great way of promoting it, of course, and it's a good way of actually getting the message out there and promoting the net beforehand. It's also a good way as well of publishing a log afterwards too. Gets people's name up, they can check they've made the actual net. You can put a signal report for them as well from your QTH, and it's a good way really of actually publicising the net, but getting people involved. They've actually made their mark. It's amazing how much that will actually generate more people to call in next week as well. If they see there's a net happening, oh crikey, 10, 15 people called in on that one, you'll find over a period of maybe 3 or 4 weeks, if you're doing it weekly, you'll build the numbers up. Now the one surefire way to fail as a net controller is to try and do all this without a pen and paper. So you need to have a little log, just basically the date of the net, just enough, leave room for each row on your book. Maybe a lined paper would be good, so maybe you have call sign, then you'd have you'd have call sign, you'd have location, signal report to you, and then it might be worth putting a little number next to their name as well. So then you can just cross out that number if they've gone QRT or if they've just disappeared. You then know number 1 is gone, number 4 is gone. You just go back to number 3 or number 5. You don't call them number 3 or number 5. You call them by their call and by their name. But what you're doing is giving a little system for yourself so you can be fully up to date about who is or isn't around. I operate a 2-call rule. If someone hasn't said they've gone QRT, then they're still on my list. But if I ask them to come back in to work 2 stations, and in two times in a row they haven't done, then I put a little question mark next to them, and on the 3rd attempt, if they still haven't come back, I cross them out because it just slows the net down. At the end of the day, one of the key things for that sort of net to work is pace. Okay, maintaining a pace, not rushing it, but not having the pace of the net slow down too much, because otherwise, if you've got 20 stations on frequency, then the net needs to move at a fair pace in order to give everybody a chance to feel involved and have a go at working somebody else. So be politely in control. That's the key thing. Be polite, but be in control, especially if you've got high numbers. If you've got 10, 15, 20 plus people, then just stress the need to keep the overs short. Signal report, how are you? This is my location. They might pick up on something somebody said. 30 seconds, 1 minute, that's it. No more. In fact, 30 seconds is a good time. It doesn't sound much, but actually 30 seconds, a 30-second over is a decent over. You don't want somebody rambling on for 3 or 4 minutes, because that will kill the net. People will just say, oh, what's the point? This guy's waffling on. They'll just go away. And then you're wasting time calling people in who have actually gone, and the whole thing can fall apart. It just needs one station to ignore that sort of 30-second rule, waffle on for 3 or 4 minutes, and suddenly the net becomes a lot harder to control and to keep people coming back to next week. Of course, I keep mentioning week, don't I? And that tends to be the sort of regular pattern for a net, especially big ones. You know, if you've got sort of, by big, I mean 20, 30 plus. If you've got 20 or 30 stations, then doing that every day is a huge undertaking, especially if you've got a life. If you work, you've got a family and stuff, well, you know, other things to do. But once a week, maybe 2 hours, is a good time to do it, and a good sort of period to do it, and you can build it up slowly. But doing a net like that every day, or even more than once a week, is a big undertaking, believe me. So if you say a weekly net, then you need to arrange it on the same day and same time. Keep it regular. So if it's Thursday night, Wednesday night, Friday morning, whenever you want to do it, same sort of time. So when I did one on 11 meters, it was, I think it was 7 till whenever actually, but we always started on 7:30. We always started at 7:30. And sometimes we would head till 10:30, sometimes up to 12. It was a really busy net. But others will be less so, and you can put an end. You can say like 7 till 9, 7:30 till 9, whatever. Thursday nights, Wednesday nights, that's the way it runs. And people will get used to it, and people will become really keen to call in. We're creatures of habit. We like to do things that we keep enjoying doing. And if taking part or chairing a net is one of those things, we'll keep doing it. Of course, frequency, the band you choose is a big factor as well, isn't it? Now, within the UK, of course, then practically we're looking at the low part of HF, or we're looking at VHF, UHF. So you're looking at top band, you're looking at 80 metres. Reliable 40-metre contacts within the UK isn't great at the moment. And anything higher than that's just not going to happen unless it's pure ground wave and you're going to be quite close to each other. And then you're looking at things like maybe 6 metres, 4 metres, 2 metres, 70 centimetres. Now, when you go into VHF land, of course, it means it's a whole different ball game, doesn't it? Because if you're going to be a net controller on VHF, you're going to have a very, very good home station, probably quite elevated, or you need to go onto a hill somewhere, and that's what I used to do. So you have to commit yourself to actually not just sitting in a nice warm shack. If you're doing this every week, you've got to commit yourself to being up a hill on, say, the second week in December. It's 8 o'clock, it's -1, or it's 1 degree, and well, it's a big commitment. And that's when you hope that 1 or 2 other people would actually say thank you for doing that. You don't look for the thanks, but it's a big commitment. And getting up a hill like that, and setting up a station, especially if you're putting up a pole, something with an antenna on the end of it, it's a tough ask sometimes. If you are going to do it from home, say on HF 80 meters, then make sure you've got a very good antenna. You've got to be the strongest, or one of the 2 or 3 strongest stations on that net. There's no point doing it if you've got a compromised antenna. It's also beneficial to have maybe a couple, maybe 3 other stations who are regulars who also have good setups as well, because if you can't hear somebody checking in, they may do so, or they may pick up somebody who you've lost in the noise that they'll be able to hear and step in, like a sub-chair group, I suppose, of 2 or 3 stations who are regular attendees for the net and have good setups. Not just about you as a chair, you need to have a team of people. Expecting you to do it for 52 weeks of the year, every year, is a big ask. Sometimes other people need to step in as well. But even when you're doing it as a chair, having other people to help you is a big, big plus, and is probably quite necessary for the net to flourish and for the thing to run smoothly. So there you go, some thoughts of chairing a net. There's probably other things I've forgotten, but they're the main things that have sort of struck me, having done it for about 2 years on 11 metres. I tried the net as well on 10 metres, which didn't really take off. 10 metres is a problem, of course, because lots of people have horizontally polarised antennas, and when you've got a big vertical up on a hill, like I had a half wave up on a hill, then it was tough. But there you go, 1 or 2 people checked in regularly, and it was quite nice, but it didn't really take off. But there you go. Now, the other thing to bear in mind, of course, is if you are not a chair, but a participant. And a couple of things to probably think about there is that the net will only thrive if you're part of it, and a good chair will acknowledge your participation and see the net as being for the good of everyone rather than the good of themselves. So if you're a participant and you feel like you're being made welcome into a net, then that can be a really big plus point for you and a good reason for you to take part. Other thing as well is to listen and try and have the best antenna system that you can, rather than putting up a 30-foot bit of wire end fed and try and go on 80 meters. Well, maybe that's not going to work very well for you. So don't expect miracles, but choose a net that you know you can hit, and you'll start to make some good friends. And actually, nets are a good way of really reaching out and establishing some handy contacts in the hobby, and people who can share ideas with you, and people who will become your friends. So if you have any comments on nets, whether you run one yourself or you take part in them regularly, what works, what doesn't work, what format's good for you, your experiences, or anything you think I've missed or would like to add in terms of what I mentioned about nets, and put it in the comments below. It'd be great to hear from you. Anyway, I've got a few more videos in the pipeline. I've got a review on a 40-meter end-fed half-wave, a look at my 10-meter setup at home to try and catch some sporadic E this summer. I'm also in the process of sorting out and building a slim Jim antenna for 2 meters. See if I can get 2 meters working from home. If you like what you've seen, then subscribe, share, thumbs up, and it'd be good to hear from you. This is Tim, G5TM, wishing you 7-3, and above all else, hoping that you stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you coming on the program today. Good stuff.
Yep,
Well,
good
what's
stuff.
it like to do 2 nets in one night, boss?
Well, a lot of the stuff that he said was pretty true. Each net, especially a repeater net, has its own format.
Yes.
I've actually got a script that I read in the beginning. It says, "Good evening and welcome to the Cuyahoga Falls Amateur Radio Club's Monday night UHF VHF net. My name's Pat, but for the purposes of my name is Pat. My call sign is November 8 Ocean Queen Papa, but for the purposes of this net, I'll be using the club call of Whiskey 8 Victor Papa Victor. Then I go on from there with announcements and stuff like that. We actually have changed the format of our net around quite a bit about 2 years ago, because it was just getting old hat, and we were taking all mobile check-ins first, and the mobile check-ins were all right, but they, by the time it got to the base check-ins, half of the people were gone, and you weren't getting any messages across or any kind of announcements across. So now we put the announcements right in the beginning. The first
that makes sense.
The thing way.
Well,
Good.
first of all, every net has a purpose, all right?
Yeah. This is just kind of a Monday night net to keep everybody aware of what's going on in the club, and to show we're still here and the repeater still works.
So basically, your net is an informational net.
Yeah, pretty much. On the other hand, though, there is another net that I run that was completely overlooked here, and that's a Skywarn net. And now the Skywarn net is a completely different animal. I couldn't when I first did these information nets, I couldn't believe the difference in them, because these are all laid back. You take a green net control and throw him in a chair and expect him to run a tornado net, you wouldn't believe the difference. I always called it the hot seat, and I was baptized by fire myself. When the first net I ever did, I had two working tornadoes on the ground, and
wow.
We did I heard from the director of the Weather Service, which was Bill Como at the time. He sent word through the on other net controls for the backbone and all that to tell us that we did the damnedest net he ever heard. I handled 153 pieces of traffic in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And that was doing something.
That's when you got some sweat coming down the brow at the end of the net.
And that's pretty much what it was, because you got to realize during that kind of a net, I've got other things going on. My phone's ringing off the wall. I'm trying to plot this stuff on the radar so I can see what's going on. I'm trying to figure out rain totals. I'm trying to see what the wind direction stuff is doing, so I can see if there's actually a tornado where it's being talked about. And I got to knock down all the false reports that I'm getting. And people, when you got a bunch of people out in the field, they don't understand what's going on out there all the time. And they'll say, "Oh, I got a funnel cloud over here on the north side of this cell, and it looks like it's going to do some real damage." Well, first thing of it is, it's not in the right place, and I have to know that. I have to look at that cell and think, okay, they're over here, and they're looking at this way, and if it's in the north, there is no way that thing's going to be in the north. There's no hook. And that's what I'm going through whenever I run a net like that. These informational nets, all you got to do is introduce the next guy. The KG8RY, good afternoon, sir. How you doing?
Right. Well, that's the easy part of it. The easy part is being on the net.
The hot seat is a lot more fun. And there for a long time, every time I would hear the tones go off for the National Weather Service tones, the hair on the back of my neck would stand straight up. And that was just an emotional key for me, and it was almost like it scared my hair. It stood straight up.
If you're listening to this and you would like to run a net, this seems like something that you would like to do, which I'll warn you, I do a net for one of my clubs. I am a member of 2 different clubs, and I do a net. And boy, when I first got started, I thought it was going to be a whole different thing than it was. I found out that it was not easy, that it was difficult. I found out that it was hard getting to know the people that were going to call into the net and their call signs. Once you've done that net for 6 months, you know pretty much everybody by the sound of their voice. That's not the case when you first get started. And in your case, with the WeatherNet, that would never be the case because everything is happening so quickly, and people often are mobile or they're on a handheld and they don't sound like themselves. And besides that, you have people calling that have never called before. So you're always taking new traffic, and that's a whole different bird right there.
And the thing of it is, you don't know how much training they've had. It used to be we had to, if you were a trained spotter, you had to take and give, when the radar was actually out of Akron, Canton, you had to give your spotter number, which was the degrees of that you are on the radar and how many miles out you were.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it would be like 28 north or 28N6. 20, you're on radial 28 of the radar.
28, you're 6 miles out.
And 6 miles out, right. So you had a pretty good idea where everybody was. Nowadays, they don't do any of that. And I don't know if it's an improvement or not. But again, what they're doing, they're dependent on the radar a little bit more than they were on us back then. And what the radar is doing, if you take when I call a report in, I'll talk to whoever answers the phone, and if the backbone's not up, I'll just go straight to the forecasters, and I'll tell them I'm a guy from Summit County. I've got a report of a funnel cloud over Montrose at Montrose or at 18 and Maslin Road, and he'll say, okay, I'll tell you, there was one thing that happened about a couple of months ago with me, and I was seeing a bunch of hail here at my house. Mm-hmm. And I called it in. I said, I'm sitting here at the corner of Talmadge and Akron, and I said, I've got one or core. I got a little bigger than pea-sized hail. He says, hang on a minute, and you hear him roll his chair over. He says, yeah, I see that. He says, you really haven't got a whole lot to worry about. There's a bunch of that around that area. He went right to the damn radar to look at it.
That is amazing, isn't it? What they can do.
And that's where your technology's really coming into play here. And if they can get it out that quick, and somebody calls in and says, "I got quarter-inch hail here," and they can go to the radar, and then 10 seconds later, you've got a warning. You've got a warning issued. There was an event that we had a couple years ago that was a funnel cloud started actually over Worcester, over Orville, and it tracked north. And I had spotters all along the track of this thing, telling me where it was. And as I was calling this into the Weather Service and telling them what was happening with it, they were going to the radar then and looking at it. And they tell me, okay, let us know if it gets any worse. It looks like it's going to head up through Twinsburg. At least that's what the track's showing us. Let us know what happens. And it went over Stowe and ended up in Geauga. Actually, it took, and the tornado spun up out of it and touched down at Stowe Monroe Falls High School, and it blew some bleachers and that over. And then it ended up doing some real damage out in Geauga County. And we tracked that thing for almost 2 hours that way.
That's amazing.
And it was, I'd have my net control experience. I sat here, somebody'd call in, okay, what do you got? Okay, this and that and the other thing. I got a funnel cloud. It's not on the ground yet, but it looks like it's starting to come out of it. Okay, call it in. And that's why
it can get hectic doing a net. And so for those who've never had an opportunity to do a net, you're listening and you're writing and you're thinking and you're doing all these different things at once. And sometimes, as the gentleman mentioned earlier, you're doing it under some bad conditions in certain instances. I know that if you're in a mobile command center, you're out in the rain, you're out in that hail or whatever, that's tough. Whereas if you're inside, there's an advantage to that. I know that when I do the net that I do, I can't do it from here at home, but it is for my club. So I do participate and I do take care of that net about once a month. But I have a hill that I drive to, and the gentleman that owns the hill knows to expect me. And he has always told me that I'm welcome there, and I appreciate that. But sometimes it means having to get out of your comfort to go do it. But the basis behind all nets is simple, and that basis is how to handle traffic in an emergency. That's what everybody is supposed to be learning through the process of taking part in a ham radio net. And in your case, my Elmer, it comes to real life.
It really does.
So that's good stuff. It's been a fun episode today.
The one other thing I will say is that if you could get in and run like a regular traffic net or a regular like a club net, where it's not as exciting as something like that, it's still good training, and
yes,
it's good for making you be able to communicate, and not only that, having people communicate with you and be able to understand it. That's
the guy out there that sat for his technician's license, and he has a radio that he ordered, which is in a box, and the box is in the top of his closet, and he's never taken it out of the box. He has no idea how to operate it, but his attitude is, well, one of these days when the S hits the fan, I'm going to take that radio out and I'm just going to go plug that thing in and doggone it, I'm going to get on that radio and I'm going to take care of myself and my family. You've got another thing coming. If you think you're going to get that radio out when the emergency is already in process, and you're going to learn how to have that radio help you out. The reason that we do nets is so that we're prepared in advance and we know what we're going to do before the S hits the fan.
That's exactly right. And don't wait. If you wait, slows the wagon down, and it doesn't do ham radio very good either.
No, it does not. You're right. Oh, this has been a good one.
Yeah.
That's our Elmer right there. His name is Pat Morrow. He is N80QP. I am Jerry, KG8RRY. Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. we will see you next week. I think next week is the 14th of December already. Wow.
Good grief.
Yeah, it's gonna be 2022 here pretty quick.
I don't
So
think we're going to be affected as far as the winter or the Christmas holidays and stuff like that. So we've been talking about that on the other shows we've been doing. I know Radioactive is going to suspend for 2 weeks. Actually, just a week now that I think about that. We're going to be the Sunday after Christmas, because Christmas is on Saturday.
that makes sense.
But the one that's going to get affected the most is a sports show that we do at Four Guys on Sports. That will probably go on hiatus till after the first of the year. And the week before Christmas will be the last of that one. But it's, holidays like this always kind of disrupt the... Oh, Alexa, hush. Stop. She's over there asking me what I want to
That happens in our place too.
Anyway, it always affects our schedule. And
Well, we will be here next week. That I can promise. So we'll see you guys then. Pat, you have a good week.
yep, you too,
Everybody
Jeff.
out there, have a good week. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week right here at 7 o'clock on the Crooked River Radio for the world according to Elmer.
7-3, y'all.
73.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. See you again soon.